Moving on from propaganda techniques, we're going to talk about several examples of logical fallacies, which, like this picture, are things that seem to be made of realistic elements and yet put together make no sense. Logical fallacies are related to propaganda in that they are both attempts to persuade the audience to believe something. The difference between propaganda and logical fallacies is that propaganda must be done deliberately. Logical fallacies are sometimes just a mistake in reasoning. The first one we're going to look at is false cause. It has several other names and related phenomena. So we're going to talk about this all together in one group. So false cause or post hoc. In the picture, you see the little boy complaining, "I wish they didn't turn on the seatbelt sign so much. Every time they do, it gets bumpy." So he has falsely identified as turning the seatbelt sign on as the reason that the airplane gets bumpy. In fact, these things are correlated, but they're both caused by the turbulence. Some examples of false cause include superstitions. For example, you wore your red hat to your test and you got an A. And the next time you wore your red hat, your baseball team won, and so now you have associated positive things with your red hat and you've mistaken the cause of your good luck. The placebo effect is actually related to this, but the placebo effect, of course, is not a logical fallacy. It's a real phenomenon in scientific studies in which when people believe that they will have an influence from the drug or whatever is being studied, they actually do experience this phenomenon. So those are sort of related. Another way of looking at this, which is quite similar to false cause, is trying to note the difference between correlation and causation. So very often people will present you information and tell you that that because two things happened together, that one caused the other. Like in this graph, it's clear that there's a connection between these two phenomena, but when you look at it, it's ice cream sales and shark attacks. Well, ice cream sales do not cause shark attacks, and shark attacks do not cause ice cream sales. This is clearly a false cause. They are correlated because, you know, they both happen in warm weather. Some correlations are pure coincidence. Expectation bias or confirmation bias is also a false cause logical fallacy. You can read this little comic. Somebody's trying to research whether or not something is true, but of course he selects the information, he cherry picks the information that agrees with what he already believes, and this is a thing that happens all the time. People are able to remember things that agree with the belief that they already hold, and immediately forget the other things. And they also look back at things that they've done, and they note that that whatever supports their belief is the thing that happened. This happens a lot with people believing in the power of prayer. Now, obviously, I can't say whether or not prayer works, but I can say that I don't think people who are praying for something are keeping charts to take note of which times it resulted in what they wanted and which times it didn't, which are some steps that you need to take if you're really going to determine if a phenomenon is real. All right, our next fallacy that we're going to look at is false dichotomy. A false dichotomy is the false notion that there are only two choices available. For example, here is a World War II era propaganda poster that suggests that your only choice is to pay for bonds or to end up in bondage. Certainly paying for bonds supports the war effort, which would help the country win the war, But losing a war doesn't necessarily mean that somebody ends up in bondage. And of course, there are many ways to support the war effort other than paying for bonds. Here are a few other pictures that give you an example of a false choice. This person sitting at her desk is thinking you can either stay at your current job or quit and live in poverty. And I can imagine someone, her boss maybe, or her partner, suggesting to her that these are the only two choices in order to encourage her to stay at her job and not, for example, apply for another job, because there may be lots of other choices, but this way of phrasing it is trying to push her towards one. Here we have another one. Who would you rather see live? And it has a mouse and a child. And of course, this is a response to the animal rights movement that suggests that animal testing should be eliminated from scientific research. Well, certainly animal testing does in fact help to find cures for diseases and things like that, but there are other positions. For example, a person might be against animal testing on cosmetics, or might be against animal testing for reasons that don't have to do with human health. So there are more options than either supporting animal testing or supporting the death of children. And then there's a list at the bottom, several other things that are often posed as either or possibilities. The only choice that you have is either science or religion, either play or learning, either masculine or feminine. And that might seem to you like a fixed dichotomy, but to assume that a thing is feminine, of course, does not eliminate a man's ability to choose it. So this is also called either or fallacy. And the suggestion is often, if you don't choose this thing, then you're not a real member of this group. Like, you're not a real man, you're not a real Moroccan, you're not a real Muslim. So this is the kind of thing that you see in false dichotomy or either or fallacy. All right, the next type is false analogy. We've seen before that analogy is a really useful tool in making a persuasive argument, but sometimes the analogy is false. When you're comparing the two things, it's in order to suggest that there are more similarities beyond the ways that they're being compared, and the logic falls apart when you follow that through. Here's a quote: "In sport as in war, there is no substitute for victory." Well, okay, maybe there's not a substitute for victory in sport or in war, and yet sports and wars cannot really be compared at any depth, and so you can't extend that analogy. Okay, so false comparison or false analogy uses a surface similarity to assume that all of the aspects of the things compared are similar or should be similar. Let's look at some examples. If we can put a man on the moon, why can't we find the cure for the common cold? Well, these are both scientific questions, and it seems like the moon question is the more difficult one, and so the analogy is suggesting that we've somehow failed in not curing the common cold. But in fact, viruses are really, really complex, and the scientific details are quite different. Here we have another thing about animal rights activists. This person says to a dog owner, "Keeping a dog as a pet is every bit as evil as human slavery. Pet owners are the Ku Klux Klan of the 21st century." Okay, so in that they are alive and that they both have masters, dogs and slaves can be compared. But beyond that, maybe they can't. A dog is not a person, and the master of a pet animal is not trying to benefit from that animal. So the analogy falls apart. A subset of false analogy is false equivalence. False equivalence is when you take two things that look pretty similar and you suggest that because one is bad, they're both equally bad. Sorry, because they're both bad, they're both equally bad. And this is a way of comparing two things that are not necessarily comparable. Here's a cartoon. It says, the person of color says, "Racism sucks," and then the white person responds, "Being falsely accused of racism sucks too." Well, yes, in that they're both bad. These two things are comparable. But the realities of racism, when it comes to things like violence, fear, insecurity, being targeted by police, being discriminated against in your job, these things are really bad. But being accused of racism means you got your feelings hurt. So both bad, but they can't be set up as though they're equivalent. So false equivalent is also a logical fallacy. All right, the next logical fallacy that we have is called begging the question. And this is a phrase that is often misused. It does not mean to request the question or to prompt the question. It means that you're using circular reasoning. And instead of explaining what you mean, you're simply defining your terms. And another word for that is tautology. So for example, I think he's stupid because he's dumb. Well, dumb and stupid are just synonyms, and so that doesn't enlighten us in any way. I'm going to show you some more examples. Women shouldn't be allowed to join men's sports teams. This is actually a tautology. Women shouldn't be allowed to join them. It's because they're defined as men's sports teams, not because there's some logical reason why women shouldn't be allowed on them. The belief in God is universal. After all, everyone believes in God. That's just saying it twice. If actions were not illegal, they wouldn't be prohibited by law. Again, it's just a circular argument, and you should take a minute to read this cartoon. Okay, the next one that we're going to look at is the straw man fallacy. So let's just start by examining this picture. What do you think? Who would you rather fight? This straw man or this strong man? A straw man argument is when one attacks the weakest part of someone's argument or invents an argument that the person did not even say in order to attack it. Then they come out looking like the winner, but in fact they have not really addressed the substance of the other person's argument. This explains it in another way. If you need another explanation, just pause and have a read here. Here's an example of the straw man fallacy. One person says, we should liberalize the law on marijuana. And the other person says, no way, unlimited access to drugs would contribute to massive increase of drug abuse. Okay, well, perhaps unlimited access to drugs would contribute to massive increase of drug abuse. But that's not what the other person said. So the person on the right here has managed to score some points to come out looking like he's won this argument, but in fact he hasn't addressed the argument. Liberalizing law is not the same as providing unlimited access. And this last one, this is another straw man. By reducing what a person has said to just the parts that you can attack, you are essentially making a straw man argument. And so this exaggerates that in this cartoon. Stop editing my remarks to make it look like I hate business. And he edits the remarks to say, I hate business. This is a straw man argument.